You are listening to the Growing Small Town Show, a podcast dedicated to supporting you, the person who really cares about the future of your small town. We believe when people get better, everything gets better, and our episodes offer the ideas and actions that prioritize people and small communities. Thank you for listening. We're so glad you're here. Our guest on today's episode is Scott Meyer. Scott Meyer is one of the co-founders of Chip.ai, which on this episode is one of the things we talk about, but he has taglined it as AI for everyone. And so I invited Scott onto the show to discuss AI, the implications for small towns, the implications for us all, and also to truly dispel a few of the kind of overarching either myths about AI, the fears that surround all of this technology and the innovation in how this is going to impact us from a workforce perspective, talent management perspective, education we touch on briefly. And truly, I was just excited to have Scott on the show because he approaches the topic with care. And in this product, Chip, which we spent a lot of time talking about, and of course it's in the show notes, so you can check it out. But the design, the intent of it was to make it accessible and easy to use. And I think if nothing else, it's just always really great to visit with somebody who works directly in the sector that has such an opportunity to level the playing field for rural communities. And that's one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Scott Meyer. Well, hey, Scott, welcome back.
Well, hey there. So excited to be back.
I know it's so exciting to have you. You, sir, are working in an area of rapid growth, an industry that's filled with rapid growth. And I think for small communities like mine and a lot of our listeners, a lot of unknown and a lot of fear and maybe a lot of uncertainty. So can you share just a bit with our audience, kind of bring us up to speed, what you've developed since the last time you were with us on the show, and then we'll just start there.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, great to be here, everybody. Scott Meyer, co-founder of Chip, CHIPP. It's the easiest way to build AI agents or AI tools for your business to help you kind of work smart and live well. And I think AI, like you said, is moving very quickly, but at the core, it's the same thread the entire time, which is how can we better augment our own skills or bring in digital talents that we don't have, whether it's we don't have the skills, we don't have the member on our team, or we just want like a sounding board, a partner, a legal review, a copy editor, like all these things that if you had them, use them, but most of us don't have them most of the time. So that's where AI is really powerful. And what's fun about Chip is we just make it easy. We provide the interface for individuals and businesses to get started. And underneath it, as AI develops, we just kind of ride that wave of offering those things to our users.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple things to unpack there. Let's just start with the basic premise of how you're positioning AI, right? Like I think a lot of times in our communities, we actually are dealing with a lack of capacity.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're human resources, right? There's a lack of capital related to skill sets. You touched on a couple of them, right? Attorneys being potentially one of them. So can you just run through again share a couple of applications of where you really see AI filling a core need, whether it's for small businesses or even just thinking in broader terms, right? For like a community on the whole.
Yeah. We kind of made a bet early on that I think is paying off, which is AI is actually horizontal, not vertical. Like it's unusual in my mind that you would hire AI because you are a lawyer or because you are an accountant or because you're a city manager. AI is, to me, is much more horizontal across tasks, types of things you do. And most of our jobs are made up of tasks. And so AI is often going to replace specific tasks, but not entire jobs. I often think about accountants, 20 years ago did a lot of math. Today, they don't do any math. They do a lot of strategy and they let QuickBooks do the math, right?
Yep.
So on Chip, people can build AI tools. And so we get to see how are people using it. And there's five buckets that we're seeing AI being leveraged in. First is in operations. So imagine you're on a Zoom call, it gets transcribed. AI helps you write an email to everyone who's on the meeting and remind them of what they promised to do, or sends a summary to people who weren't there, right? Second would be sales. So AI is really good at capturing people on a website or finding information about someone so that you can call them and make a sale or get a lead. Third would be marketing. So just think content, right? Anytime you're going to repurpose something, AI is going to be really good. I think about AI as like the world's best cover band. It works much better when you have a good original, right? And then it can make covers of that. So you, as the business owner or marketer or leader, can come up with concepts, probably with AI's help, but then AI will repurpose that into all the places that you don't have time to go post. Um, Fourth, I think, is the most interesting, which is company search, is what I would call it. So every document you have in your city, in your company, in your legal code, in whatever, how do you just find that quickly? And it might live in Google Drive and OneDrive, and some of it's on a website, and some of it's in a chat, and some of it's here. AI is so good at just giving you an easy interface to say, what's our vacation policy? Or who do I talk to about health insurance? Or how do we upload videos to YouTube? Whatever it is. So company search. And then let's see which one I forgot. Oh, fifth would be customer support. So the ability for customers to ask questions without bothering a human. And a lot of interesting use cases here. Like we work with some schools and, 60-70% of the messages they get, the phone calls, the emails are when's registration? How do I get my kids signed up for this sporting event? Who do I talk to about absences? Like these are not questions that should distract the admin person from their job. It just destroys their day.
Yeah.
And the ability for people to get those answered quickly without talking to a human is what they want anyway, right? So customer support. So I think those five are things that most of us do in our companies, in our cities, in our schools. It might not be the majority of what you do, and maybe you don't do a lot of customer support, you do more sales, but like one of those things is a really good use of AI.
Okay, there's a couple things I want to circle back to from that list. Thank you. The bucketing is really helpful. I think it gives people a way to think about because I think there's such a broad range of adoption
Yeah.
with AI, and I'm sure you realize that, right? Like there's people that maybe use Chat GPT every now and then to ask it some simple prompt, and then there's people that are really using it as a core, like to provide core functions. So my hope with this episode is just to dispel maybe some of the myths, reduce some of the fears, and give people places to start, right? So listening to your five buckets, one of the things you said that I think is really important to come back to and highlight is a beautiful analogy, by the way, that AI is the best cover band of all time. Like that's a really
Yeah.
smart way to frame it out because I think people do worry about loss of original content and loss of heart, maybe,
Yeah.
right? So could you come back and just speak a little bit more about that? Because again, and then I would say that my second kind of thing I wanted to come back to, which I think they're tangential, they're connected, or adjacent maybe, that it's the idea that we're going to outsource these things that humans were doing or maybe are doing. And I think there is a general fear that we're going to lose that humanness, whether from a perspective of creation, which was your first, the first thing that caught my ear. And then the second was even just talking about customer service, sales, those kind of computer generated prompts. And does it lose heart? Does it lose connection? So what are you seeing related to those two things?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's I one quote I read is that if you aren't worried about something, you're probably not trustworthy. Like if you're just all like roses, like you're not in it, right? So like
I,
there is going to be a major change, but I think what will become more valuable is those things that people connect with. We're still going to want human connection. And so whenever you're doing creation that is heartfelt and personal and that people can actually kind of connect with, I think that's going to have increased value. Um, and also like there might be increased value on knowing it's not, AI, which is really fascinating. But I think so much of the content we create doesn't have to be that way, right? Like a lot of our day to day, what we're working on, like this press release or this email or this, summary of your podcast on YouTube, like probably doesn't require your heartfelt like emotion to be poured into it. And so
Mhm.
my hope would be we can spend more time creating those unique pieces and less time doing like the routine sort of reproduction work. Um, AI works best when it's trained on a voice. If you
Yeah.
just ask a question on ChatGPT, it'll be fairly robotic. Where we see it going at Chip is like every secretary should have a secretary. Like every writer should have a writing assistant. Every executive should have a executive assistant. And so you should create I call it a protege, a digital twin, whatever the word might be, that talks like you, right? That learns how you write and think. So that way you can augment your skills. And so when you want to write a LinkedIn post, it sounds like your voice. When you want to write a memo to the company, it sounds like how you would talk to them. Um, and then you can easily say, write this for parents of fifth graders, write this for an executive, create a post targeting millennials, whatever. And it can think about who it's for better than we do. I think when most of us write or think, we
Mhm.
do it in the way we are accustomed to or comfortable with. AI is really good at just helping us change it for the audience so that it's better received. So I could think about AI as like that old hearing aid, in the early 1900s where you'd have like the huge megaphone in your ear. It can actually put a megaphone to our audience so that it goes in better, but still maintains your voice. So a lot of directions there, but one of the things we love at Chip is making it easy for people to launch their first assistant. And ideally that's an assistant prepared on your knowledge so that when you talk to it, it sounds like you or how you or your company, depending on how you're trying to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, great answer and perspective because that's the other thing I think, I've known you now for a good number of years. We met a
Yeah.
good handful of years ago at a conference in South Dakota. And I think I I don't just see you as like an AI peddler kind of guy. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like because you have a creative and entrepreneurial spirit. That's just a part of who you are.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important because I do think, and I kind of hear this perpetrated narrative, and it's this big, it's kind of fear mongering, right? About how AI is just going to strip away all the humanity. Also, of course, replace all the jobs,
Yeah.
like actually replace all the jobs. And I think there's so much value in our audience knowing that you actually care, you care very deeply about the creative process. You care very deeply about furthering that entrepreneurial, even the mindset of a person to think creatively, to think collaboratively. Um,
Yeah.
and how has that, like your experience, because you've worked with entrepreneurs for years, right?
Right.
How has that influenced the way you built Chip, the way you design Chip, and kind of your entire process?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Chip came out of, the design is that there's a huge gap between what's possible and what's done. And often that gap is greatest in areas of less technical skill. So, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, like, when you look back, you can more easily connect all the dots. Like that's how it feels like with my life. Like when I look back of the different professional opportunities I've pursued, they all have a connection to um, digital literacy, like basically taking skills and making it more accessible to people, especially in my community, right? Like in Brookings, where I'm from, or Fargo, where I live now, or generally across the world, people who have less access. And so, what excites me is that if people can learn to use these tools now, they're first of all going to be able to learn and move their careers in the areas that'll be more sustainable and more leveraged, and they'll probably be able to increase their reach, do more with less and um, just be prepared. I think the worst thing is to wake up in 2 years and all of a sudden, nobody needs a copy editor and you've been spending 2 years learning to be a copy editor, right? So you need to think about what's coming, and be able to take advantage of it. But always, like every time there's been some kind of shift, what I always find is like actually doing the thing is the hard part, right? Like we can learn and know as much as we want, but you still have to be brave enough to like push the publish button or put a video out or tell people your idea. And that's not going to change. Like there still is an act of bravery using a tool and taking action. And so I feel like I've spent a lot of my life trying to encourage people to take action.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
right now, it's like it's fascinating because so my favorite stat right now is that almost 50% of Americans use AI on a weekly basis, and around 5% of businesses say that they use AI. Um, which is obviously false because those 50% of people work at those businesses. And
Exactly.
so
Yep.
it's like, there is a gap where people aren't telling their boss, they're not sharing their colleagues how they're using it. There's sort of this problem that people aren't sharing how they're using AI. And so I think it's right now, it's an interesting moment of like businesses need to be brave enough to let their employees use AI and to come up with common sense policies and training. So I don't know. My vision of the future is that when you come to work, you get a new job, you're going to get an AI agent that's built by the company the way they want it to perform, just like you get a cell phone or a laptop or a phone, maybe even. Um, right now, everyone's just bringing their own cell phone, doing whatever they want in whatever way they want. I think it'll get more streamlined, and I think businesses who think about that now are going to be ahead because they can train their workforce how to use it and actually like get that kind of peer-to-peer learning to accelerate AI in their company. So
Yeah. No, though
I don't
that
need much. I'll go off on
I
tangents
love
for
it.
you all
I love
day,
it.
but hopefully
Geek out
that's
all you want, Scott. It's great. But listening to you, I try to, again, there's so much that I can do, so much more that I could do, that I could be turning to and utilizing AI to do. So some of this is actually my own question, not just my imagined perspective of our listeners, if you will. But listening to you talk about, well, it's interesting that what you're finding is this gap in honesty about it. Like I would be curious to ask, like, what do you think is what's driving that? Why is there this hesitation to share or be honest about it? What do you think is driving that?
mm. Yeah, I think one is fear for sure, both ends. Like, I think employees are afraid if my boss knows I'm using AI, they're not going to need me or not pay me as much or not want me here.
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
bosses, leaders are afraid that if they tell their employees to use AI, they're going to share information that shouldn't be shared, or maybe the quality will go down, or people won't think they have to work as hard. So there's just a lot of like fear. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think there's always resistance to technology, so people don't want to use it. Maybe it's because they're afraid or they don't think they're good at it. The thing that fascinates me about AI is a lot of research has shown the people who are best at using AI are actually older employees because they have expertise in that field. So AI is really good at taking you from like 80% to 110%, right? So it'll raise the floor. I always think about AI is a really good floor raiser, making everybody's emails not have spelling mistakes, right? Or getting new employees onboarded quickly. Or if you're having sales calls, giving you like good scripts that are just like average, right? It brings everyone to a C. But if you know how to describe, if you know who Picasso is and you ask AI to make a painting like Picasso, it'll be very similar to Picasso. But if you don't know who Picasso is, how do you explain to AI how to make that thing?
Right.
And there's a lot of us who have the words and expertise for our thing that a regular person doesn't. So if I'm going to say, design a building that is Georgian architecture, but I don't know what Georgian architecture is, it's really hard, right? Or if I write it in the style of Steinbeck or, create a report that's creating a matrix on these competitive axes, like if I don't know what a matrix is or I don't know what a competitive report is, like I'm not going to be able to do it. So AI is really good for those who already have expertise.
Okay, so that's something I want to spend a couple more minutes on because I think there's a really important piece of that that maybe can alleviate some of the surface fears, like just the
Yeah.
immediate kind of let's just dismiss it because it's somehow making us less valuable as people. It's actually doing the opposite and also directing our energy and our investment in our own development too. It can I think you'd said it earlier, like if as a small business owner, you have to do everything. Like that you're just
Yeah.
basically every single thing, function of your business is your responsibility. So
Yeah.
rather than me spending the next 2 years learning the skill of copy editing because
Yeah.
it's a function of my business, right? If I let AI step in and do some of these things, or at least support the function of some of these things, because I think people also forget like there is such value in having something to edit versus create
Oh
from
my
the
gosh.
whole stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of
I call it
that's
the
what I
blank
use
page
it for.
problem, right? Where like the blank page is so scary and so
Oh,
hard.
It is.
And if you can say this sucks, here's how we should edit it, like that's great. That works really well. And that's actually, I think AI is an idea machine, not an answer machine,
Yeah.
And so it's really good at being like, give me 5 more ideas, give me 10 more acronyms, give me, 2 drafts, and then you can react to it. You've probably, maybe I talked about this in the first session, but I've talked about the AI sandwich, and this is how I think about people approaching AI, which is, it's going to start with a human asking a question, then the AI going and doing something like creating potential answers or bringing back information, but then it's still going to be on the human to take that and, either improve it or share it or kind of act on it. And we're moving towards agents, but what I see is these agents still require that human to say, okay, like this is good or keep going, so it's always coming back at the end towards that human. So yeah, I think that's, one way to think about it. I was just looking up, there was a phrase that somebody had. Yeah, what was this? The way that, that AI is allowing you to move from thought into action like so much more quickly. And so when I have an idea, I can tell AI to go create that thing, and it's kind of like, in the past, if you couldn't design, I would have an idea and I'd go talk to a designer and get them to build a prototype, or I'd go talk to a coder and have them build this website. Like, what's really exciting now is like we can go from idea to demo or launch without that in between skill. And so for those of us who don't have or haven't spent time developing that like extrapolation skill, like now AI lets us go from ideation to launch like immediately. So I think it really rewards, honestly, like Renaissance people who have curiosity and want to try stuff. And maybe you haven't had time to build up like the launch piece, but you have the concepts. So there's a lot there too, but that's where I think it's headed.
Well, and I think again, I think it's super exciting because it also, I mean, it's what while you just said something that's going to sound like a counter to the statement I'm going to make. You literally just said like it supports or kind of rewards Renaissance people, right? People that are
Yeah.
naturally very curious. But I
Yeah.
also think in some respects, it's very helpful to people that want to niche down into a really specific,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I think
Right.
because again, you get to actually direct your energy for your own development
Yep.
towards whatever the thing is. Like and I think I did never comment on this, but your stat that older people in the workplace in particular are seeing more success is a really fascinating thing to look at. And
Yeah.
again, it comes back to time spent in the industry, time spent investing in that skill set or
Yeah.
that area or kind of body of knowledge, maybe depending on what it is that we're talking about. But
Yeah.
like that literally can apply to everything, Scott. And that's really
Yeah.
cool to me to think about.
Yeah.
Because like it can be a really noisy world and it can be really hard to figure out. I even think about this for young people, maybe that haven't gotten into the workforce yet or even just at that point where they're trying to decide what to do next. It's it gives you maybe a way to direct some of that learning and growth and know that everything else can be augmented at least, if not totally supported by
Yeah.
AI.
I mean, I think, it goes back to that quote of like, if you're not a little worried, you're probably not paying attention. Like, just things are going to change. And when things change, that's when people get worried.
Right.
And I think one of the most eye-opening and I think like incredibly promising study that recently came out was in Nigeria. They did used AI as an AI tutor for students. And the students who were utilizing the AI every day after school, in 6 weeks, they completed the learning that was done over 2 years in the classroom. And it's because they were able to be driven by themselves. So self-driven learning in the things they were curious about. And what was fascinating is like, unlike most educational kind of solutions or interventions, it got better over time. It's like as people started using the AI to learn, they actually learn faster and faster. Instead of most interventions, there's like an improvement and then it kind of like levels off, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
I eat better and I learn better because I'm now have better nutrition, but at some point that stops. Whereas there's no, at least from this study, there's not an end. Like it's accelerating over time. And so you just think about this is available to everyone in the world now for free, right? And how long will that take to change things? And what does that mean? I think as a parent, it's like both incredibly exciting to think, okay, my kids can go down any rabbit hole they want on their own and get one-on-one support in the way they learn. But then also like, what does that mean for learning from a mentor or teacher in the school?
Right.
And what do you tell them to learn? Like
Mm.
I have 6, 7 years to go until my oldest goes to, is of college age, but it's like, I actually don't know if 6 years from now it'll look much like it does now. And if so, like I would push them right now. If I had to guess, it would be towards that Renaissance strategic. How do I know enough about a lot to then go learn or be able to pull ideas across industries? It's going to be fascinating.
That's
It's
that's when you start talking about that, I think that touches on some just core fears within me.
yeah.
I
Oh,
just
totally.
The Growing Small Town show is recorded locally at the Growing Small Towns podcast studio located in Oaks, North Dakota. It's produced by Pheasant Canteen Studio in Aberdeen, South Dakota, with marketing support from Cassidy Johnston in Canyon City, Colorado. Our intro music was created and produced exclusively for Growing Small Towns by James Bergman, singer and songwriter from Fargo, North Dakota. Local and small. It's what we support and it's who we love. Get your community a shout out on the podcast. Call 701 203 3337 and share your small town success that you just don't feel is being celebrated quite enough, and let us shout you out. You can also share your biggest people challenge, and we'll dedicate an episode to offering ideas to help. Hell, you can basically tell us anything, and we'll do what we can to answer. We can't wait to hear from you. Our small town shout out is to the city of Wilmer, Minnesota, population 21,000. Don't get yourself twisted here. I know that's not a small town, but on the level, that's a small community. And their shout out is also one of those things that I normally wouldn't get super excited about, but there's a specific thing they've added here. So they shared with me that they just recently completed a comprehensive plan that hadn't been updated since 2009. That's not the cool part. Here's the cool part. It's the first time in the city's history that community engagement was actually in their plan as a priority. And the way that they found that or discovered that or got to that answer was truly intentionally including diverse groups of people in the development of that plan. And that is how you create more engagement, more interesting output, and more diverse and interesting voices at the table. You invite them and you include their perspectives. Way to go, Wilmer, Minnesota. Again, just that because education, and okay, so again, our audience, right? We're talking to people in small communities.
Yeah.
A public school is often a heartbeat of a small
Oh,
small
totally. Yeah.
town, and
Yeah.
the idea of public education. No, okay, so I should just say, because I'm much more grounded in hope than fear. I think we both probably share that. I think you even said that before we hit record, like I'm a hopeful guy. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
say I'm hopeful also. So I don't mean to like create this fear about this thing, but the idea that our public education system will adjust or adapt to some of this technology, that in itself doesn't scare me. And I hope that it comes. My bigger fear is that it doesn't adapt fast enough and then kind of crumbles and dismantles. And then what happens? So I don't know if you're reading about anything with that, if you have any perspective to offer on that, but it's definitely going to change, Scott. Like it's already changing. If a
Oh, yeah.
student body in Nigeria can see that
Oh,
kind of, I mean, this is
no.
something
And
we can't ignore, right?
it's
Like
like
that's
net positive, but the problem with net positive, it's not always positive for everybody, right? It's like,
correct.
it's
Yeah,
awesome that people around the world can now learn everything. That also means now I'm competing with more people across the world to do the thing that I do, right? So, uh,
absolutely.
But I think I think it does free teachers. Like the way we've seen people using Chip is schools don't get paid more per student, right? Like their budgets aren't going up. So
Right.
they have to figure out how do we do more with less? And AI is a perfect solution. So we have schools, like I mentioned, taking questions, requests from parents and students using AI to basically filter those. So, 40% of the questions still come to the person, but the others don't. And they can spend more time working with people who need it. Same thing with teachers, they can do personalized learning plans for every single student in a push of a button. And the students are going to have higher outcomes because it's like targeted to what they need to learn. Like we have an integration with Canvas. So like in the learning management system, you can talk to AI and it's trained on your homework and your books, and it's like everyone has a personal tutor. But again, going back to the first thing we talked about is like the student or person still has to want to ask the question, right? They still have
Right.
to have some inner drive to learn or to challenge themselves. And that's where a teacher mentor is so important to be there being like, you can do this, like go harder, keep going. Um, I was at North Dakota State, helped start the Entrepreneurship Center. And one thing I know, because we worked with, over 1,000 schools across the state with entrepreneurship is like most of these rural schools don't have the teachers for specialized courses. And so they're taking Arizona State online courses, maybe NDSU courses, like whatever it might be. Um, and that costs money. It's not going to the state and they're not hiring a teacher because they can't find them or they can't have someone in that community. And so what if that great teacher in that school could not only teach English and social studies, but now they could, with a little bit of help, be an expert in economics or in entrepreneurship, which they might not offer otherwise. So I think that's my hope is like it does allow more to be brought into the school system. It helps to remove some of the onerous tasks, around admin, content creation, grading. Um, but there's going to be risks too, because now everybody has a world-class education. So what does it mean now to be a great school? Like that's going to be an
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
question.
Yeah. Again, I think what we hope to do with this show, well, is highlight great people like you, doing meaningful work. And I'm going to have you maybe explain CHIP because you've referred to it several times. People might be like, "What the hell is CHIP?" At this point, we probably should have done this sooner in the episode, so I apologize for that. But I think it's also to not be afraid of opening up a meaningful and kind of rich conversation about things that might be tenuous for us.
Yeah,
Whether just to think about it or there it's a polarized kind of thing. And I think AI is absolutely a bit of a polarized
yeah,
topic of conversation, right?
totally.
So
Yeah, I would say we've been here before. It's just different because now what we're seeing is what AI is best at is complex thinking. And in the past, what's been most easily automated or replaced is manual labor. And so whether it's, throughout the 1900s with farming or in the early 2000s with manufacturing, like we saw blue collar work getting automated away by machinery. And we saw, massive job loss. Like there's not a lot of phone operators anymore, right? But those people went somewhere. Um, what I think what was unexpected is how good AI would be at copy editing, writing, legal research, class, like becoming a tutor, creating courses, those are things that we've almost in our mind been promised. Like I go to college, I get a degree in one of these like humanity areas, and I'm able to go out and get a good job and use my brain and create these things. So it's hard because those are actually the more easily automated jobs now. And so it's just like a mindset shift. And so again, what we have to figure out is like, how do you connect that into personality, strategy, thinking across disciplines? Because again, AI will be really good at like a single task, but it's going to be not as good at like switching across these tasks in an easy way. And I think it'll take, like we know from that stat with businesses using AI, it'll take a while, probably longer than we think, for it to be adopted. Even though it could be adopted a lot of places quickly, I think it won't due to fear, due to technology, whatever. Um, so I think it's worth thinking about, like, is what you're doing repetitive and the same? Like, are you a language translator for people at the courthouse? Like, that's probably going to go away, right? Are you
yes.
taking stock photos? Like, that's going away. But are you taking interesting pictures of people doing some activity, maybe that adds personality, or are you creating something with information that combines your passion of sports with, an interest in your local community and, kind of an interesting tone, like kind of a personal local newsletter, like that's going to be, harder to automate because we can't be a cover band on something that's not already being covered. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Exactly.
uh, in rural communities, you almost have an advantage because what's the source material? Like I could take information from the New York Times, but they're not talking about, Lisbon or something like that, North Dakota. So it's like,
Yep.
could you be that voice? ChatGPT launched a new tool this week called Deep Research, which is really mind blowing. It's so good at going out and doing PhD level research. So essentially, it'll go out, find all the medical journals talking about XYZ, bring back the reports, tell me what I should know. The big limitation is a lot of that stuff is behind paywalls or is custom information. And
Sure.
so that becomes the differentiator. So, what's your custom information? It's like your business probably has processes that aren't available online, other people can't copy. Maybe you have stuff in your mind, like you definitely have your network of people you've talked to and you can connect the dots and ideas, and like that's not coverable, that's not searchable, right?
Yeah.
And so you
Yep.
have to create something that's not just out there that everyone else can access, because if it can be accessed by Google, it'll be accessed by AI, which means it can like do the job faster, better than us. So what is your unique kind of knowledge source? I think is interesting to think about.
I think that's a super helpful thing to think about because I also think, from where I sit,
Yeah.
a lot of what we do, it's people development, right?
Yeah.
Like leadership skills. I guess
Yeah.
actually being a better human in terms of how we connect, how we collaborate. It's kind
Yeah.
of, like I've talked about this before, but it's almost like 21st century learning skills, right? The four
Yeah.
C's of those things are still they're still really, really important. And even though you could get some tips and tricks and ideas from AI, like the way that you embody them, there's not a way that AI can. And again, you can take me to task on this if I'm wrong, Scott. Okay, like
Yeah.
seriously. But I guess the way I think about it, it's like humans, every single human is actually unique. And so
Yeah.
therefore their source material that actually is precious to you and
Hmm.
unique and specific to you. And I think
Hmm.
that's something to really think about. What's your perspective? Where, like, if you create a Venn diagram of the thing that you're going to create, right? Like, what unique experience have you had that shapes the way you think about it? What's the body of knowledge that you have that shapes the way you think about this thing, right? Like, there's so many ways to think about your unique and individual perspective that does live within you because you embody it. That's
Hmm.
something that AI can help you articulate. AI can help you market it. AI can help you. I mean, there's a ton of stuff, but it can't replace it because
Hmm.
you're you.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah. No,
feel true? Or is that just
yeah,
me
I think it's true. I think there's a
projecting?
fascinating question around like, yeah, what shapes us and how could we be shaped by other sources? So it's like, um, yeah, like obviously we're kind of like the product of our community and our families and the people around us. And can we fill in the gaps to become the people we want to be with AI, right? Like I would love to know more about being a handyman because I'm just not good at, I have a sliding door that's been off the hinges for 2 weeks and I just like can't take myself to like figure it out. Even YouTube's not helping. So it's like, could I better develop this part of me by asking questions and learning more? And um, so there's still a piece though of like I need to want to develop. Like I think that inner
Totally.
drive, that grit is going to be so important in this age of abundance because to get the abundance you still have to go ask or still go get it.
It,
So
it
I don't
almost
know.
like something you're touching on, I think that's fascinating is just like resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Like that's a skill. That's a skill that everyone can develop, but I think some people are kind of innately wired for it, right? Either
Yeah.
resourcefulness or like that like just blind curiosity that you just want to ask all the questions.
Yeah. Well, it's like
right?
there's an
I mean,
exercise we used to do in my entrepreneurship classes, which was you just go to a coffee shop and you ask for a free coffee. And the point is you need to learn to hear no, and you need to learn to ask for things that seem ridiculous or think things that seem ridiculous because just doing normal isn't enough, right? And especially in
I
this age of
love that.
AI, like just creating a normal thing is not going to help you stand out or succeed. So it's like, what's the weird thing you lean into, and how do you develop that skill of like being willing to try stuff that are going to fail? Because the thing about AI is like, yeah, you're going to get answers. Sometimes it might not be right, or you're not able to understand it. You got to ask again. You got to ask again. You got to ask again. So you got to get used to like looking foolish and maybe that's easier with AI because you're not in front of a class or you're not in front of an auditorium, playing your solo. Like, I don't know, but I think people are gonna need to hone resourcefulness, grit, ability to like fail and get up, right? And I think a lot of those are developed best in community, in with mentors in a school, in a sporting club or whatever. So like that's interesting. It's like, are there skills like that fundamental to using technology that need to be developed interpersonally? I
Yeah.
would buy that argument, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I love that because of course I really do think like how do we confront this issue
Yeah.
honestly with our eyes wide open, but also truly through that lens of hope over fear. It's just so,
Yeah.
so important to me. So I think this is a good segue into Chip. Why don't you explain a bit more about Chip? Of course, we will have it linked in the show notes. But why'd you build it? Who'd you build it for? What are you
Yeah.
seeing with it?
Yeah, I mean, our mission from day one's been AI for all. So initially that was how do we help people build apps and sell them? And what it's turned into is how do we help individuals and businesses build AI agents that are built, trained on their knowledge, right? So whatever you're best at, your company knowledge, your individual knowledge, YouTube videos you've made, notes you've taken, how do we create AI that could leverage that to help you work smarter and live better? So the way it looks is you log into Chip, you can create AI applications. So think ChatGPT, but it's pre-trained, and then you can share those applications with your colleagues or your friends or your customers. And so it's really great for people who have special knowledge, like a business, and they want everybody on their marketing team to write in a similar way, or they want their, financial advisors to pull data and be able to research it quickly, or a school that wants to answer parent questions so that they can focus on these things. You don't have to go into ChatGPT every time and ask new questions and start over. Essentially, you have pre-built apps or agents that do exactly what you want. And yeah, it integrates everywhere. So you don't have to go to another site. It is branded like your company or your own personal brand, and you can even sell them. So it's a great way to, work better, but also potentially build a business on AI.
Okay. It's so great too. The interface is so amazing. I really it's very, very cool.
Good. Thank
And
you.
I
Yeah.
have not implemented it like I could or should. And that's like this every single time I even interact with you, like I'll get an email from you or whatever, because I'm on your I'll just be like, oh, like I really need to dedicate a little bit of time to just really thinking about how to best use this thing. But I'm wondering if right off the top of your head, you can identify like what is a was when you saw it or you were given this feedback from a customer or a client, like what's the coolest application, like what's the coolest way you've
Mm,
seen your tool used? I
yeah.
just mean coolest, maybe like most unique, or like
Yeah. Yeah.
it hit your brain in a way that you were like, oh my gosh, that's so rad, I never thought of that.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the most common or the way a lot of people start is with a protege, like we talked about. So you create a version of you that you can talk to, but it can be used in limitless ways. I think one person just used it this week to identify like what would be the impact on tariffs on very specific products. So you could actually go in there and ask questions about a product. You could take a picture of something and it would come back with if it would be affected by tariffs or not.
I kind of want to
Uh,
vomit at that one. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I'm
So
not sure
that's,
that scares me, like I'm not sure I really want to know.
totally wild use case. Let's see. I think we have a really interesting one is a person who's built it to train police academy students. So people who want to become police officers in Maryland, they have to take a big exam and pass it to get into the police force. And so they built a chip. We call them chip chats. So a chip chat to basically prepare those students, and they go through scenarios on chip that then they might face in the real in-person training. So not just like book knowledge, but also like scenarios that they'll be given in the test. And, we've had different versions of that too. Some people are building like sales scripts. We have actually a car dealer using it to create sales training in the style of movie characters. So like you'll log in and like Forrest Gump walks into your dealership and they're asking questions and this new salesperson that they're helping train has to respond based on all these like kind of crazy questions that person asks as a way to prep them for actual sales conversations. So yeah, just I mean, there's so many wild ones, and those are just the first ones that come out of my
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. So one thing I'm wondering too is there so there's a cost to using Chip or Chips?
No, you can start free. Yeah. So you can
Right.
start free on Chip, and basically, the more training you need to give it. So if you need to upload more files or add more websites, you would pay for that. And then you can pay for privacy. So one thing unique about Chip is you can keep all of your files, your user information, your conversations even in your own cloud. So for banks, for healthcare, for
Hmm.
schools, we're HIPAA compliant, FERPA compliant because that information doesn't go to OpenAI or to Anthropic. So that's kind of when you start paying, when you want to layer on those additional features like exporting other software, adding in privacy. So yeah, everyone should go try it for free. It's just chip.ai, free to use, free to create an account. And I think that's the key with AI is like, just try it, right? Like so many of these tools are free to
Yeah.
start at least, and you can
Yep.
see where the edges are. There's things it doesn't do well. But man, it's really good at a lot of things.
Well, and I think you do you have training? Do you
Yeah, yeah, we
provide
do a
training?
ton of training. So we have a new academy that's launching, and this is not just on how to use Chip. This is AI generally. The best way to kind of sign up for that and get started is on our Substack. So if you go to chip.substack.com, we post all of our new courses and lessons there. And then you can join, like, for example, Tuesday, we're doing a workshop. This will be probably after this is posted, but we do webinars all the time on LinkedIn and on our courses. So if you just want to learn about AI, especially integrating for business, is like what we talk about a lot. That's going to be awesome, the Chip Academy. So yeah, just go to chip.substack and subscribe there. And then every time we have a new lesson or course, you'll get an email.
That's fantastic. And it's Chip with two P's,
Yeah,
correct?
chipp
Double
dot
P.
com.
Yeah. Okay.
Double P. Yeah, yeah,
It's really, and I think that's one of the reasons I was excited to have you back. Again, I had heard a presentation that you gave to, like, it was specifically designed for rural audiences, which was really
yeah,
cool. And there's such an accessible way that you approach this topic, Scott. Not only in what you built, like the platform that you actually built. Chip is super, super user friendly, super
yeah,
accessible, but you continue to approach the entire topic with an openness, I think a generosity of spirit and more of a hope than a fear. That resonates so much with me as a person, right? Like how I want to show up for rural communities because I I think AI can be almost the great equalizer in a
yeah,
lot of respects. Instead of feeling like we're just always being left behind, which can be kind of a drumbeat for rural places
yeah,
sometimes. It's not an overly it's not something that we want to rally around. It's almost like a death toll, right?
yeah,
It feels so uninspiring. It feels so kind of demotivating. And I feel like recognizing that AI can serve in some of these ways. Obviously, it doesn't totally even the playing field, but I think it
yeah.
can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing that fascinates me is some of the countries investing the most in AI are those with massive workforce shortages. So Singapore, Gulf states, they see this as a competitive lever. Like if we can get good at AI, we don't need to have millions of people in our country to be able to compete economically. And I think the same applies for rural communities, which is you probably can't find the person to do XYZ job, or you don't have that teacher to teach entrepreneurship. But that's okay because now people could still come to your school and get that learning without having to remote in or without having to like go to a different place. So like it really can unlock and solve some workforce challenges. And I think especially in a state like North Dakota,
Oh man,
there's really not a fear of workforce loss because we don't have enough workforce. Like, let's
correct.
talk about that when all the jobs are filled and people are lining up applying. Right now, it's like, please give me someone who can create this high level quality thing for me and is willing to work. Like, that's hard
Yep.
to do in a lot of communities.
Yep, for sure. And I think the other thing that North Dakota specifically has is just like we can really you said that AI could be utilized quickly in a small town and in a creative way
Mhm.
too. So as you're saying, like entrepreneurship as an idea could easily be taught through
Right.
AI, but then the application of it could get really cool in terms of what local community involvement might look like. And that is,
Yeah.
again, where we can really differentiate ourselves. When you're smaller, there's just like less layers of kind of BS to roll through,
Yeah.
less red tape, right? North
Yep.
Dakota on the whole is a small state. I think that's what's so powerful to me about small places too, right? Is like
Yeah.
there's real benefit to being small because you can be
Yeah.
nimble, you can be faster, and AI can actually accelerate that
Oh, totally.
that even quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you just have to be curious. So I think that's a great place to end it is, this is open for everybody. And if you can go try it, like then you never know where it'll lead to.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Scott, and thank you for all you're doing to demystify and take the fear out of AI. It's really, really important work.
Yeah. No, it's great to be here. I love your work. Keep going.
We hope you loved this episode of the Growing Small Towns Show. We encourage you to leave us messages at 701-203-3337. And be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at growingsmalltowns.org. In the meantime, keep doing what you can with what you have right where you are. Your community needs you.
Because we are growing small towns. We are growing small towns. We're right here living our best lives, as crazy as it sounds. But we are growing small towns. Growing small towns, we are growing small towns. We are growing small towns.